Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Hello everyone, welcome back to my lecture. So today we are going to talk about tax incidence and economic burden. So in our last couple of lectures we have been talking about tax incidence, economic burden, and then once tax is imposed on commodity, and then how it is getting divided or shared between consumer and producers, or only by producers, or sometimes only by consumer. So we have already talking about that, and also we have taken couple of economic measures to understand tax incidence and also this relationship, and we had actually tried to take in elasticities as one of the measures, and then we tried to understand different types of commodities, their relationship, and then its impact on the tax incidence. So today we are going to talk about tax incidence and how efficiently we can get the outcome. Especially when we are talking about economic efficiency, we are also talking about the burden, economic burden that we are talking about. Like when we are talking about economic burden from consumer side and producer side, that is from the individual's perspective. But then when we are talking about economic efficiencies, then we are also supposed to calculate economic burden, or one can actually say that that is nothing is basically the deadweight loss or the social cost that we already introduced this particular concept in our externality debate. So we are now talking about taxation, and in that taxation we are trying to understand how economic efficiency outcome can come. So now before getting into tax incidence and economic burden much more in details, let us also try to understand some of the functional relationship. The first relationship that we are trying to attempt here to understand the price and taxes, how they are interrelated, and we already, to some extent we already know as a student of economics, but I would like to just bring those concepts once again and then try to understand how it actually work here. So as just assume that this is the kind of price and quantity relationship, and let us assume that price and quantity demanded, which is P and Q, both are inversely related. So basically the law of demand, that particular that particular assumption is being followed here. So as price of the commodity increases, demand for that particular good will be decreasing, right? So that assume that, and then we are assuming here demand function is downward sloping. So let us assume that this is the demand function, and let us assume how, if it is price, then what would be the total revenue function. So total revenue, as we know that this is P and Q, and then P, that we have the value, and then here like we can get AQ minus BQ square. So if we want to understand the changes in the total revenue due to 1 unit changes in quantity, as we know, this is nothing, this is marginal revenue. So marginal revenue like MR equals to delta or DTR by DQ, which is nothing, is like A minus 2BQ. Right, so this is we understand from marginal revenues point of view, and as we know like if we give this as equation 2, and from equilibrium point of view, and also profit maximizations point of view, the condition where profit maximization will be there is like MR is equals to marginal cost, and if we put the value of MR into equation 2, then we get MC equals to A minus 2BQ. So now if we put the value of MR in place of MR, if we can replace by MC, then it will be like MC equals to A minus 2BQ. Now suppose, and we can give this as say equation 3. Now suppose tax is imposed. So now suppose tax small t is imposed, and then tax is imposed on the producers on the commodity, and then it will get reflect on the it will be reflected on marginal cost curve of the producers, and therefore we can write A minus 2BQ equals to MC plus T. So now we can write this particular equation as like 2A minus 2BQ. Since we added 1A here, so we are actually subtracting 1A from here, and then we write like this way. Then 2 common is ABQ equals to MC plus T plus A, and then 2A minus BQ is nothing, is from equation 1, it is actually P, and then it becomes MC plus T plus A, and where we try to understand the relationship between price and tax, then it will be like marginal cost plus T plus A by 2. So this is, we can actually take as equation 4, and here we see that price and taxation, they are actually proportionate. So as T means tax increases, then price of that particular commodity will be also increased. So this is the relationship between the change in price and the taxes. So now let's move to the next relationship. So now here we are trying to establish the relationship between the change in price and then elasticity and then tax, and this is very important point, and we already discussed in context of market when we were actually introducing different concepts of market. We are just bringing those concepts and then trying to kind of relate with the further with the taxation. So for instance, what is the total revenue? So total revenue is actually nothing, is PQ, and then assume that demand function is like the same that we had shown in our last slide, like P equals to A minus BQ. But then here in the total revenue, so here if we want to understand the changes in the total revenue due to change in the quantity, then it becomes DTR by DQ is like P plus Q D so DTR by DQ equals to P plus Q DP. So now so changes in total revenue due to changes 1% or 1 unit change of quantities, nothing is the total marginal revenue. And then if we can put like 1 plus if we can keep Q out, then dP by dQ, then MR will be nothing, 1 minus 1 by E, and let us assume like dQ by dP multiplied by P by Q equals to minus say E. So as we know that elasticity is, how do we understand elasticity? So price elasticity is like changes in the total output due to 1% changes in the price. So that is how we calculate the elasticity, and then this negative sign, it shows the relationship between how price and quantity, how they are interrelated. So it's basically the relationship between price and Q. So here again, from the first order condition of the profit maximizations point of view that we get, where MR equals to MC. So here if we give this as equation 1, and then if we put the value of MR here in equation 1, if we replace MR by MC, then it is MC equals to P into 1 minus 1 by E. And when we are saying that tax will be imposed, and then tax will be imposed, it will be imposed on the farm, and then farms, the tax will be reflected through the marginal cost, because cost of production for the farm will be increased, and therefore MC will become MC plus T, and then P by 1 minus 1 by P, right? So here we can write the entire this particular functional relationship as P equals to MC plus T by 1 minus 1 by E. So this is what the equation 2, and this is the relation that we are trying to kind of show you, that there is a relationship between price, elasticity and tax, and this is how they are related in case of tax incidence, and that's how it also will help us to calculate tax burden. So now to move forward, so what is the tax incidence in context of general equilibrium? So there is a one point of discussions in one of our previous lectures, where we tried to show you and also discussed like the difference between partial equilibrium and the general equilibrium. In the partial equilibrium, as we know that partial equilibrium is just dealing with only one commodity at one market, with a single commodity at a time. General equilibrium is basically how different markets are actually interacting with each other, and in case of Edward box diagram, and also in case of Pareto efficiency, we actually spoke about general equilibrium. So here in case of tax incidence, let us discuss how how we are trying to relate. So this will give you much more better understanding, like why one market taxation or imposition of tax on one commodity or on one market will have eventual impact on the other markets. So let us see how it goes. Like just assume that there is a market for bread. So if tax increases price and lowers the bread consumptions and the production. So how it looks like, as we have been discussing this. Assume price of the bread is measured along with the vertical axis, and quantity of the bread is measured along with the horizontal axis. So suppose this is the demand, so demand for bread. So we are talking about market for bread, and then this is the supply of the bread. So this is what market equilibrium, and here OQ1 is the quantity and OP1 is the equilibrium price, amount of equilibrium price. So suppose tax is imposed. On the product, like on the commodity, and then who will react? By now I'm sure you know, and you will also agree that it will, producer will be, the tax will be imposed on the producers, and producers behavior will be supply behavior will be reflected to the supply curve, and then supply curve will be shifting leftward, and this is the area which is called T. So like S1. So bread market shifts from supply of the bread shifts from S to S1 because tax is imposed. As a result, we get the new equilibrium point. So initial equilibrium is at A, and here next equilibrium is B, and then Q2 is the quantity that gets reduced, and as a result of this imposition of the tax, price of the bread has increased from OP1 to OP2. So this is what the general thing that we have been talking about, and we also have been trying to show you like what is the difference between A, and if we put this another 1 point C, then small t is the tax that is the amount between initial supply curve and then supply curve after the tax imposition. So this is what happens in the bread market when tax is imposed on the commodity, and then quantity will be reduced and price will be increased. So now let us see what happens there in the labor market, because this bread market is just not working in isolations. When tax is imposed on the producers, either forward shifting or backward shifting, there will be some strategy for the producers where producers will try to find out the way in which tax can be shared, and then tax burden will be borne by the different parties. So what happens in the labor market? Let us see. So lower bread production reduces labor demand, and since labor supply is perfectly elastic, no effect on the wages, right? So let us see this. So here is the price of, price of the labor is like wage. So here is the bread market, and here it is on the labor market, and therefore this is like, this is labor demand 1, and then here labor is measured along with the horizontal axis and wage along with the vertical axis, and then this is labor supply. So in our last lecture we already discussed about that, when tax is imposed on the labor and then how it impacts, and we also had shown when taking two parts of the labor supply. One is upward part of the labor supply and also the backward bending part of the labor supply, and then we tried to show you how it happens when taxes is imposed on the labor, and then how producers they enact towards that. So when tax is imposed on the bread, and then here and then as a result demand for bread has reduced, and therefore underproduction has happened, and then therefore definitely there is a lower demand on the labor. So labor demand will be shrinking, which will go downward, which is LD2, and initially LOL1 amount of labor was employed in the economy, and here OW1 amount of the at the OW1 amount of wage rate. With this fall in labor demand, equilibrium falls from E0 to E1, and then we get lesser labor employment, or labor amount of labor is reduced from OL1 to OL2, and then wage is reducing from OW1 to OW2. So now this is the impact that we are seeing, impact of the taxes on the bread, that will create the less demand for the labor in the bread factory, and as a result of which labor will be less demanded, and therefore employment will be reduced, and also wage also will be reduced. So now let's see what happens in the other market where we are talking about land, where this bread factory say is planted. So lower production of the bread reduces the demand for land as well, because there is no expansion of the expansion of the scale or the bread factory, and therefore we don't require much more land, for instance, and land supply is inelastic, as we already said that land cannot be increased that way. So always land as a product is, and land supply is inelastic, so no effect on the quantity, but then reduction in the land price. Landowners bear the producer's burden of the tax. So let us show here so how it goes here. So here we are talking about land market. So here price, and here quantity of the land. So here is the land supply. So here is the supply, which is perfectly inelastic, and here demand for bread, like say has reduced, and here demand too. So assume that decrease in demand of say in bread market, that also has impact on the land market, because now and therefore land supply will be inelastic, and therefore demand curve will shift downward, and the initial price was P1, now it is P2, and therefore but then quantity is fixed at Q1 star, and this is what the downward pressure on the land. So just imagine in the general equilibrium case, so when tax is imposed on one market, then certainly it is not only getting stuck in only one market, it has the impact on the other market, the way we have shown here. Like if we impose tax on the bread market, it will actually go to labor market, and so not directly in form of sort of tax, but then of course in terms of labor demand. So labor demand will be reduced, and also wage also will be reduced, and employment will be reduced, and then and also we can see it also has the impact in the land market, because land is fixed, and then if demand goes down, then entire price will be reduced, and that's how land market also gets affected. So this is one of the just one example to show you like how tax incidence, it has the it has the multi kind of market effects, which we can actually discuss with the help of general equilibrium. Then this is the purpose that I had shown you. So I will stop here, and we will discuss even further more in details, because there are some measurements of the tax burden calculation, how we calculate tax burden, and also economic burden, and how it is related to the taxes in my next class. So thank you very much for your attentions, and I stop here.